I'm excited too. It'll be fun.
Right on. Last time I saw you was at the Douglas College coaching symposium, and since then we've created this Volleyball Coaches of Canada Facebook page. It's growing every day. We've reached out to all the provincial associations to try to build a coaching platform for coaches West Coast to East Coast. So doing these interviews, we just try to touch base with coaches across Canada and pick their minds. And Brian G says you're a volleyball wizard. So,
Oh, Brian is very kind.
right on. So, can you tell our viewers how you got into volleyball and as a player?
Yeah, probably like a lot of student athletes. I started in another sport. I was more of a basketball player. Kind of at the beginning of high school. I moved from Saskatchewan to Alberta, and I wanted to meet some people or before school started. So there was a tryout. So I just figured if I went there, I'd meet some students. I went to tryout, and then they asked who the setters were, and a bunch of short guys put up their hands. So I figured that was my best shot. I put my hand up, and I made it. And then I started loving volleyball, and then got involved with the Dinos Club, and just kept getting more in love with the game from there.
Right on. So I didn't know you. I didn't know you're from Alberta. So how did you get hooked into Trinity Western?
So both my parents went to Trinity Western. My mom played volleyball here. My dad played hockey, and so it was kind of always a goal of mine to end up at Trinity. But I was, so I was taking some recruiting visits for basketball, and so when I was on my visit for basketball, they asked if I wanted to meet the volleyball coach, and I said, no, not really. I don't really want to play volleyball. And then Ron Pike was the coach at the time. He happened to walk right past us when I was talking to the admissions counselor. Like, oh, there he is. So I'm like, okay. So then they were leaving on a bus for a trip, and so I walked across campus with Ron, just talking, and he was running through the regular questions like, hey, what position do you play? And when I said setter, this is back in the day we were still in the college league.
Yeah.
And so a 6'3" setter doesn't come across the college leagues very often back then. So He kind of stopped in his tracks, and then he's like, are you any good? It's like, oh, I'm okay. He's like, do you start? No, but I back up Jeremy Wilcox. So he's like, oh, well, everyone in the country backs up Jeremy Wilcox. So from there, Ron did a great job of recruiting me, and I learned a lot about recruiting from that experience. He called me every 2 weeks, made me feel really special, wanted, and valued, and I wanted to go to Trinity in the first place, and the volleyball team made me feel like I was going to be a really important part of the group, and that led to me choosing to play volleyball at Trinity Western.
Then you played there for 5 years, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Right. And then after that, you went from playing to assistant coach with Ron. And you were assistant coach for 2003 to 2007?
Yeah, 3 seasons. I took 1 season off in there. I moved to Colorado for a year to do something different, and worked at a Bible college, and really just snowboarded for the year to
nice.
a gap year, so to speak.
Yeah.
Then I went back in assistant coach for 3 seasons, and then Ron moved on to the business sector, and I was lucky enough to be given the job.
And you've done amazing things since you've taken the helm there. I mean, you've had 8 national championship berths in the playoffs there. 4 titles. How do you do it? Tell us all your secrets.
Oh boy. Man, I wish there was a secret. That's what I always try to tell coaches is there's no secret. I mean, it's just the same thing every coach is trying to do is be really sound fundamentally, get a team that's all on the same page, try to find a way to be healthy and hot at the end of the season and play well. I mean, we talk about different roadmaps and different things that we want to help us be successful, but I really wish there was a secret, but there's really not. I think we have great players.
Was Ron your inspiration to continue on as a head coach, or was there someone else that was not affiliated with Trinity at the time that was kind of a mentor outside the picture?
I would say it was more of an accident than anything. I was hoping to continue to play a little bit, but I got engaged, and so my wife had 1 year left of school, so we wanted her to finish up, and then we were going to try our hand at Europe for a little bit. I wasn't very good, so I mean, I could have maybe played some low-level stuff for free and just seen Europe, and that was kind of a thought maybe for a couple of years. But Then Ron started making noise. So I assistant coached for 1 year just to pay the bills and to get in shape. And
Yeah.
and then that year I really enjoyed it. And so then Ron started making noise like, hey, maybe I'm going to move on soon. So I didn't really know what I was going to do at that point. So it's like,
Right.
a career in
So,
coaching sounds pretty nice. So I really didn't mean to. I didn't set out to be a coach, but I really
kind of,
enjoyed it when I had the opportunity. Yeah.
yeah. So in your opinion, in what you do in your program, what makes a great coach?
Huh.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's an open-ended question. So
I think there's a difference between what others think a great coach is and what you as a coach need to think a great coach is. I mean, some people think winning makes a great coach. If you win a bunch of titles, then that guy must be a great coach. Well, maybe. And then sometimes technical knowledge and great cues and drills, maybe that makes a great coach. And I mean, maybe sometimes. I think some coaches are really good at relationships, and I
yeah,
think that's part of being a great coach. But I mean,
yeah,
I think probably the best way to summarize it, a great coach is somebody who's good all the time. And that's the consistency. That's what great players are. I think that's what great coaches are. I mean, in the book Good to Great, they got an analogy called the 20-mile march. And basically it's this story of this guy named Taylor and Amundsen, and they're trying to get to the South Pole. And one guy, on really good days goes, 50 miles, but on bad days only goes 20 miles. Whereas the guy who ends up being successful every single day, rain or shine, he does 20 miles. Every day he's just consistent. He's good. And he ends up winning the race. I think that's what really great coaching is when it's easy, you're good. When it's hard, you're good. When the sun shines, you're good. When the rain comes, you're good. Like, I think that's what truly great coaching is. It's based in rooted in principles and it's consistent. And I think that's what the guy, like Wooden or Coach K or Alex Ferguson or, in our league, got like Ganaluk or Preston or McKay, like the guys who've been doing it for 20, 25 years and have
yeah.
maintained that level. Like that level of consistency is what makes great coaching to me.
Fair enough. So now that you're, head coaching Trinity Western and you've been doing it for a while, over the years, have you changed any angles on how you recruit players? What do you look for going into the club season, going into, the high schools, all across Canada, I'm guessing, to find the right fit for you as a coach?
Yeah, I boil it down to five things. So I think it's three tangible and two intangible. I mean, the easy things, you need height, you need jump, and you need arm speed. I mean, at the end of the day, if you don't have those things, you have to be that much better than the athletes who do have those things.
Right.
Not to say that guys, in the world stage, guy like Michael Kubiak is like 6'1" Polish outside. He's the captain of the Polish team. And he's incredible, but he has to be so much better than the guy who's 6'8", touches 12 feet,
Right.
because he just doesn't have that same size and jump to fall back on. So that makes life easier when you have taller, higher, better arm players. And then the intangibles I really value are work ethic and success. And I find those lead to lots of other things. If a kid has work ethic, then he's willing to work and learn. And if a kid has experienced success, then he wants more. And winning is a bit of a drug in sports. And kids who've won before have an ability to leave their egos away because they want to win so much more than a kid who's never experienced it. So I really like kids who've experienced that before. And it doesn't
Right.
necessarily mean a national championship, but just some level of success in this game. Success breeds success. And we did a straw poll. We had some kids hanging with our team last year, and I think every single athlete on our roster last year had won a provincial title either in high school or a club. And so
Yeah.
I think that kind of just creates a culture of winning a championship type mindset that you can't really train as a coach. You have to recruit it.
Yeah, and I definitely think there's a culture and with Trinity Western, with the men's and women's program with Hofer, that there's an expectation by players too that that you guys are going to play at the top level, and hard work obviously is going to get you there and keep you. So here's a tough question: have you ever had to kick anyone off your team?
No.
You're lucky. You're lucky. So I guess team cohesion is huge for you. That's a very
Yeah,
huge fundamental.
for sure. And let me qualify that. That I get to recruit and choose my players. So I mean, whenever I talk to club or high school coaches, I'm just so fascinated because a lot of times, even in club context, you have tryouts, but essentially you don't get to choose your players. You just
Right.
choose what's available.
Right.
Um, I get to search the country. I get to spend years gathering information, building a relationship before I choose to invite the athlete to the team. So by the time we get to that point, I've kind of figured out what's going to work and what's not going to work. So I have never had that problem. Ron Pike had a great phrase. He always talked about if you have a small front door in, you'll have a small back door out. And
Oh,
that's where we
yeah,
were very careful with who we let into the program. We won't
right.
have to worry about either kicking players out or players leaving disgruntled.
No, fair enough. And I think I was going more after, also, if their grades are not, at a certain level, do they,
Yeah.
that obviously closes the door as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, and we've had that before. We've had kids leave the team on their own choices,
On their
but
own
not
choice.
by my choices.
All right, fair
If
enough.
they choose not
So,
to attend their classes and do well, then that is their choice
yeah,
to not
fair.
school. But and unfortunately, that is part of our reality. Is some students are just don't like school or not ready for it yet, or but that's very rare. It hasn't happened a whole lot. But I do believe that team cohesion is huge. I mean, the phrase we always use is team beats talent, but a talented team doesn't get beat.
Right.
So if you can find talent and you can mold them into a really cohesive family type unit, that's when you got your best chance to play under the biggest pressure. So at the end of the day, if you're in a national semifinal against, I don't know, one of the other great teams in the country, your talent gap isn't big enough to win alone. So
Right.
who manages the moment, who manages the pressure better, who plays up to their potential the closest. And I feel like if you have a great cohesive, again, family type team, that's your best chance of handling that type of moment. And I think that's one of the things that we've hung our hat on for success is when our teams have been really cohesive and tight, we've had great success. And when the team hasn't been as together, then we haven't had quite as much success.
Right. So during a training season, I guess during the off season, how do you progress to have these players season ready? Like, are you practicing, let's say, 4 to 5 days a week in the off season, when they come back from summer, or is it a gradual progression where they go from maybe 3 practices one week, then 4 practices the next week? And how does that kind of all look for you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's an inexact science. I think there's lots of science out there, but
Yeah.
I would say I'm not an expert in that. I think it's year to year is a big thing. I
Right.
mean, right now we have four athletes who aren't going to who are coming to our team this fall, but right now they're with different national programs and they're going to be playing until September 3rd or something.
Got it. Yeah.
So usually we would have started training camp this week, but now we bumped it back 2 weeks because we don't even have those guys, and we have a couple guys coming back from injuries. So this year we're going to have a longer, slower build, where other years we've kind of hit the ground running and try to play a bunch of games right away. So I really think it's year to year. On You got to look at what type of team you have. Are they young? Are they old? Are they injured? Are they fresh? What was that off season like? I think the whole planning and periodization thing is really, really important, but I don't think there's a necessarily a cookie cutter model that works for everyone. For me, the goal is to be playing well and don't ever lose in February is kind of the thought. If we
Yeah.
never lose in February, we're in a good spot because that means we're going to probably have won the conference. We're going to
Yeah.
be hosting playoffs, and then we're going to head into nationals with a high seed. So any loss prior to February is just part of the process, but you don't lose in February,
Don't lose in February.
and
Okay.
that's our
So
yeah. So
what's that?
maybe in
Sorry.
club context, right? Maybe you don't lose in May, right?
Right. Fair.
Everything
No.
prior to May is building, but you don't lose in May. You got nationals, you got provincials, you don't lose in May.
So there's so many, like the volleyball world has exploded in again, my opinion, in the last, couple of years, 2 to 3 years. And there's a lot of new coaches coming in. So in a practice, do you guys run 2 hour practices normally? Would that be a fair
Yep,
assessment? How
yep.
many drills would you run in a practice?
Well, I think as as
On
few
average.
as needed and as many as necessary, I guess would be the way to put it.
Okay.
I really think, my practices run pretty similar flow. You get your warm up phase. We do some kind of skill work phase. And let's say it's on 2 hours, you got about a quarter in warm up, a quarter in skills, a quarter in systems, and a quarter in gameplay. Now, your systems are still gameplay, but it's kind of modified gameplay.
Yeah.
And I think that would be early season flow. for me, once we kind of get into more regular season, you trim down your skill part and your system part and increase your gameplay part. So let's say warm ups a quarter, skills and systems maybe is a quarter, and then half the practice is gameplay. But I think the trick with that is your coaching inside of the gameplay needs to be very focused and very, very clear. Like if you're working on blocking, then that's what you should be coaching. You can't coach everything all at once. So, designing activities that support what your objectives are, and then using your coaching to teach those objectives, I think is key.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just going to get caught chasing your tail coaching everything.
Yeah.
But I really believe that you learn the game by playing the game. I know there's so much talk about random and fit and block training and all that stuff. For me, it's fun. The kids love it, and I think they get better at the hard parts of the game, which are reading and decision making.
Yeah.
I mean, reality is technique doesn't win you a whole lot of points. If you have bad technique, it'll lose you a lot of points, but it doesn't actually win you the points. It's decision making and play making and knowing how to play with, the context around you is really what kind of makes good players. But you do have to have a technical foundation. It's like building a house. If you don't have a solid foundation, you can't get to floor 3. And then you got to build floor 1, and then you got to build floor 2, and so I would say as soon as you can get your skill level to an acceptable level, I like to get into gameplay and work into those more subtle type training parts of decision making and reading.
Yeah, and I picked that up from I got to work with Team BC this year with Coach Chris Dal, and he was head of the program, and very first thing we did was gameplay, and it was kind of, it took me back, but it was just great to experience that, and I think a great point you made was coaching within the gameplay. It's not like and I'm speaking on a club, a club or high school, mentality here. It's like, here's a ball, we got half an hour left in practice, play, wash, or something like that. So how do you work with your athletes in goal setting as individuals, but also as a team?
Yeah, I'm really not too into goal setting, to be honest. I think we kind of have a roadmap for success for our team that we lay down. Like we need to kind of hit these markers in order to stay on track to be in position to win a championship. But I don't know that they're goals, because if they don't happen, we can still win. It's just easier to win if they happen.
So you don't have any, like, well, I guess your one goal is obviously don't lose in February. So
I would say that's more like a part of the roadmap. So I mean, the roadmap we would lay out is you protect home court, you split on the road. That should lead to, and then you don't lose in February. That should lead to a top 4 finish, which leads to hosting playoffs, win 2 of 3 in one series, win 2 of 3 in the next series, win 1 of 2 in your medal matches in Can West, and then win a quarterfinal, and then you're in a semifinal at Nationals, and then at that point it's just a gong show. Everybody's awesome.
Yeah.
So, and then you're playing against the other 3 best teams in the country. So it's anybody's day at that point. It's kind of luck takes over a little bit because everybody's healthy, everybody's hot, and everyone's talented.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the roadmap. But a couple of years ago, we ended up winning a championship, and we came from we were like a 500 team. We were 6th in the league. Yeah. But you can win lots of ways. That's why I don't know that goals are, especially collective team goals, when it comes to performance or something that we're super into. I think I would rather phrase it. I think guiding principles is what I would say is important, because those don't fluctuate with performance. They're kind of rooted into what makes you tick. It's what you bring to the gym every day. It's what you bring to the matches. It's hopefully what you bring into your off the court, out of volleyball life too. So I think guiding principles is what we talk a lot about. We don't really talk necessarily about goals.
Okay. So how do you deal with loss? I mean, you've been extremely successful, but no one's won it all every time, right? So how do you deal with loss personally as a coach, and how do you deal with loss like with yourself and your staff, and how do you deal with loss with a team?
Yeah, very poorly, I would say.
Okay.
I'm not a good loser, and I mean, I still haven't we've lost, we've won 4, like you said, but we also lost 3. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of what I was referring to. Like when you're in those games, the other teams are awesome too. I mean, so you're gonna lose. It's just part of sport, and you're gonna lose some really heartbreaking games. And I think this is where your question is headed: is how do you use the losses to teach the lessons that you need to learn as a group and as a person and as a coach?
Yeah.
For me, I really don't believe you learn anything from losing. It's a bit of semantic phrase, but I think when you lose, you get all these lessons kind of put on the table, but you haven't learned anything until you've succeeded. And
Right.
so, there's a bunch of stuff from our loss we had in March that are sitting on the table, and I think about daily, and I lose sleep over nightly, thinking about, oh man, I want to do that, or I want to do that, but I haven't learned those things yet. My team hasn't learned how to be better in that match or make different choices, or until we actually get a chance to succeed. And once we've succeeded, then we can look back and like, now next time that happens, I know what to do. And so I just think losing is one of those great. Or the analogy would be you have to if the sandpaper the wall before the paint will stick. And
Right.
sometimes the walls are too smooth, and sometimes you need to get roughed up. And I know that's kind of where I'm at, where our team's at, is we feel very raw heading into this season. And as a coach, that's exciting. So I don't lose well, and I really don't think to be a great competitor and a great player, a great coach, you should lose well at all. But I also don't think emotion should factor a whole lot into any of these things. I mean, our job is to teach lessons, create learning environments. And if you're super emotional, hung up in wins and losses, then it's very hard to create an environment where athletes are open to failure and learning. And
Yeah.
so I lose very poorly, but I think, in the words of my assistant coach Ben Ball, is it definitely makes us better.
There. No, that's a great answer. Uh, I want to kind of turn it to the younger age groups now.
Sure.
I know you're a technical director with Ducks Volleyball Club, and are there? How do you work with the new coaches? Maybe they're coaching U13, U14. I know that Volleyball BC now has U12 and U11 league. How do you work with them directly and guide them in the right direction?
Well, I got to say, at those younger age groups, I'm really not an expert by any means. So in our structure at Ducks, I tend to handle kind of 15 and up.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And then the younger age groups, guys like Brian G or Evan Kellett, like some of the more experienced youth coaches,
Yeah.
are kind of the interpreter, so to speak, from me down to the younger ages.
Right.
Is I really have zero experience coaching anything below U15. So, but with that said, I mean, I think it all comes down to when we're working on setting up the whole club, or how to bring along a duck in my context. We want, from the day they walk into the club to the day they leave, to have some core principles that they'll, no matter what coach they play for, they're going to learn that this is how to play volleyball. And for me, it's really about controlling what's in your control. And in our game, passing, setting, serving, spiking are
Right.
in your control. And that's the cool part of volleyball, is when we have the ball, there's nothing your opponents can do to take it. So if your team is trained well enough, there's literally nothing your opponents can do to stop you. Now, stopping them is hard too, but that's not in your control. And that's where blocking defense comes in.
Yeah.
I think, building your fundamentals around the things that, as a coach and as a player, you can completely control. So how well you receive the serve, how well you make quality sets, how difficult the serve you put into the court is, and then how hard and where you spike the ball. If we spend all of our time on those 4 elements, really blocking and defense, it's really out of our control. If you're playing against Brazil from 2000, you're not blocking or digging them. But if they can't block or dig you, then it's a great game.
Right.
So I really think that's kind of where you got to invest your time, in the areas where you're going to get some kind of return on it. Now, the question for all young coaches is going to be, now, how do you do those things? And I think part of that is understanding what you're looking at. If you got a bunch of athletes who are really tall, well, then maybe you should spend some more time on spiking. If you got a bunch of athletes who are really small, then you're probably going to be better at passing and setting. So I think understanding your context is part of it, but like I said, you got to have the right foundation globally, and then you probably need to be a little bit specific with your group on how you can max out what their strengths are while minimizing their weaknesses.
So, we have a lot of probably club directors on this Facebook page, people that run programs. Do you sit down with all the coaches as a technical director and, have like a preseason meeting, kind of show what the expectation is or what we're going to work on technically, or what do you do?
Yeah, so the way we've structured it, again, it's kind of the genius of, like I said, guys like Brian and Evan and Jordan, and is we have these two coaches symposiums essentially where I run two Sunday evenings, 2 3 hour sessions where one of them we're talking about the skills that are foundational to the way we want to play as a club.
Okay.
And I talk about a couple key cues, like we call them chefs, but essentially it's just a cue, and it's what's important. The most critical part of a skill is what we have to make sure that every player in your club does. So when a kid comes out of Ace Volleyball Club, they all have this ability to hit the sweet spot of their platform.
Okay.
No matter what, you may not like their footwork, you may not like the way their hands are together, but every single kid from that club knows how to sweet spot a pass. Well, for me, that's the critical part of reception. So I would like to know that every kid who's come through our club is really good at they can sweet spot 8 out of 10 times. And then spiking. Every kid who comes through our club, I would love for them to be able to hit the ball with spin and depth. And if they can do that, then their arm action is going to be different from player to player, but they all hit with spin and they all hit with depth. And so I think that's kind of what we do with our skills. And then we do another session the following week where we talk about the system. So we want every team in the club to all play a similar system.
Right.
I mean, the coaches have the freedom to tweak based on their age group, but we want, a system that is so a kid can flow through the club regardless of coach and have a style of play that, is synonymous with the club. And I think that builds a little bit of identity. It makes success easier from season to season. It also makes it a lot easier for coaches because if you're coaching a 16-year-old team and you have a bunch of kids come in and they already know kind of basically how to defend your system and block your system, so much of your time is saved. And
Right.
And it's like the house we talked about. You just layer and layer and layer, and that's I think that's a good club system, is to have some kind of cohesion top to bottom. If you're just having a 14 coach doing one thing and a 16 coach doing another thing, the club's all pulling in different directions, and the success of those teams are largely based on the talent of the players and coach. And
Right.
that's not a good systemic, good systemic approach to success.
Right.
Your success as a club should not be based on the talent of your players and coach. It should be based on the organization, execution of your structure. And then great coaches will make it even better, and great players will make it even better. And you shouldn't have that much fluctuation if you can organize it that well. And that's super hard, and we're still working through it, I know, with our Ducks group. But I think that's what makes good top to bottom clubs. And I think you can see that around the country. The ones that have a style about them are successful at all levels.
Yeah, and I'm a Surrey boy, so I'm originally from BC, and I coached out at Fleetwood Park back in 2004 to 2010. What we were doing at senior back in 2005 to 2010, we're doing at U15 now at club, on how the game has evolved. Is there something that you would say are musts at U16, just because that's more what you're familiar with? Is at U16, 17, 18, are there things that teams should be really implementing to give kids the best chance to possibly obviously play the next level, which is post-secondary?
Yeah, I think the must is understanding how to score points. I find that we overcoach our kids in technique, and we don't understand how to score. Especially in my experience with like the women's club players, is they're just incredibly gifted technically, but the construction of a point is something that's lost. And I know we talk to our Trinity guys about that all the time. Is you're going to get more than half of your points you need to win from points. You're going to get another 30% of your points from their errors. Really, serving and blocking don't account for a lot of points. You need to be able to kill the ball. So everything that, you're doing, I don't think that we do a good enough job of harping on how to kill the ball, because there's so many ways to kill. We teach spiking and we teach arm action, but we don't actually teach points. And I think that's something right now in the men's game in the world, you're seeing a lot of off-speed shots, a lot of joust balls, push balls,
Yeah.
reset. There's just a lot more creativity to the way points are being constructed. It's a really fun time to watch volleyball, but I don't know that we are doing that as well as we probably could or should at the youth levels. Right now, we're so stuck into trying to have good technique that we sometimes forget that we need to score the ball, and the ability to kill the ball is what's going to make you win. And so I would say that's probably the area where I would love to see some growth for sure.
Yeah, and it's funny because I did a camp with Graham Vigrass for kids sport a couple weeks back, and we had a bunch of female and male athletes there, and he was talking about pushing the ball into the pot, rather than like tipping over the block,
Yep.
and seeing these kids look at him like he had four heads, and then
Yeah.
try to attempt to do it, and it was 90% of the balls went into the net, but once the kids got the hang of it, it was they were like, it was definitely an aha moment to athletes. So,
Well, it's
I
like you
yeah
think about the states, right, in their basketball. Why is USA basketball so awesome? Well, the creativity in that game is awesome because when they come home from school, they go to the playgrounds and they shoot hoops till dark.
yeah
We're a hockey nation. I grew up in Saskatchewan. I'd come home from school, I'd put my book bag down and grab my skates and go to the outdoor rink till dark. And then in
right
the summer, we play street hockey. And my boys are doing that now. They play street hockey every day after school, and then he plays ball hockey at night. And it just creates so much free play and opportunity to be creative and find cool ways of dangling a guy or making a new shot. Or, I mean, that's why certain nations are very gifted at their sport. you
right
know the talent code is full of these examples. It's a great book if for those who want to look it up. But
Alan, okay,
we
yeah
don't do enough of that in volleyball. Like, I mean, that's where I think beach is a great game for that, because you have to be very creative in beach. But I don't think we have enough free play or enough chances for athletes to be creative and figure out these things that Graham was talking about. I mean, how many coaches have uttered the words, you got to hit the ball to win. Like, well, that's absolutely untrue. Sometimes it's true, but you don't. Sometimes tipping every single ball will score, and sometimes recycling, or sometimes jousting, or something. There's so many different ways, and I think creating those free play opportunities for our athletes is so important for this game, and not being structured and stuck into a drill or a skill technique. Or every innovation in volleyball has come from athletes, not from coaches.
right
So right now, the big trend is people are spiking the ball on two from the pipe. Well, I guarantee you, it wasn't a bunch of coaches sitting around like us on an interview saying, I bet you, if the setter just digs the ball to the pipe guy and he spikes it, it'll work. Now, I'm sure what happened was Irvin Engapet was chilling out in practice, and his setter just like, hey, I'm just going to set you this ball. Or maybe even the setter just dug it and the guy came out of six and just spiked it. And they're like, oh, that's cool. And then us as coaches saw that and like, oh man, that's a great idea. Let's figure out a way to create a structure and train it. And just like a jump serve, I like gotta believe that the jump serve was invented by just some dudes goofing around in a gym saying, how far can I jump into the court and spike this? Or
yeah
how far back can you spike the ball? And then somebody hit a great jump serve and they're like, wow, we should probably try that. So innovation is done by athletes in every sport. And if we don't create the environment for athletes to innovate and be creative, then we're not we're relying on coaches to sit in a room and invent athletic moves. That's just never going to happen. So
right
I think that's really, really important for our sport, because we lag behind when it comes to creativity. At least in North America, we do. You watch the Brazilians or the French play, and it's just so cool and athletic and dynamic, and we want to structure it so much. I think we need to let kids have that opportunity to be creative and innovate a bit.
yeah and I watched a replay of a highlight of your guys team last year, and I forgot what game it was, but it, I think the setter actually went up and hit a back row ball or something. Like someone set it was something crazy. It was out in the east when you guys were playing out there, but it was like it had my jaw on the ground, and I sent it to all my coaches, and I was like, I didn't see that coming. You know,
Yeah.
like, and it was just free play. And I
Yeah.
don't rated it on the spot or if you guys bloody practice this stuff, you know?
No, and that's the thing is, I mean, we had the coolest play I think I've ever seen live the last year where they tipped the setter, he set it to the pipe player, he jumped like he was about to spike it, and then he set the middle player on a 31.
Yes, that's
And
what it
and it was we've never done it
was.
before. It's never worked. And I mean, they've tried it a couple times in practice and it's been a nightmare. But that time it worked, and I really want to be the coach that creates an environment where that's acceptable to try once you have a fundamental base where you can make those plays. Because
Yeah,
what an amazing and it's rooted in the principle of making us hard to play against, creating scoring opportunities, staying in system longer. So all of those principles are in part of that play, but nowhere in that is that you should jump set the ball or that you should pass the ball perfectly to net. The principle is we need to set the ball with speed. We want to attack the middle third of the court, and we want to be in system more than out of system. So
right.
by digging the ball to a spiker keeps us in system and lets us attack through the middle third of the court, and it makes us hard to play against. And so those principles are in place. The technical foundations are there. So then let the kids try to figure out how to apply those tools into a really really neat situation, and it created a nice play. Now I don't know that that's the go-to necessarily, but that's that free play. Like, we're in basketball, somebody dribbled through the legs one time to get past the defender and everyone probably lost their mind. So it was necessity is the mother of invention, but I think that's an important part of our game. Is it has to be rooted in those principles, though.
Right. So here's some quick questions, and this is basically club related. Um, uh, should we be teaching triple block or just staying at double block? And let's base all these questions on the U16 to 18 category.
Double block.
Okay.
Reason being is you're likely not blocking the ball, and so if you don't block the ball, you need to kill it. And killing the ball from a triple block position is extremely difficult for anybody, let alone a younger club athlete. Our Trinity Western team almost never triple blocks for just that reason. So we're going to have to dig the ball, and then once the ball's been dug, we need someone to spike it, and it's easier to spike with 4 or 5 steps than it is with 2 steps. So
get the same answer, male or female, that doesn't matter?
Absolutely. It's really important. The less athletic the athlete, the less triple blocking should happen, I think.
Okay, fair. Now, spin serve, jump serve, or standing serve, and I know there could be a different answer based on male and female here, so it's up to you.
Well, now you're talking about my conflict all summer. I'm working through a bunch of different studies, and I'm thinking through a lot of stuff when it comes to serving, and I haven't come to an answer on that. At the end of the day, whatever serve you can put in at a high percentage that generates a 2 pass.
Okay, fair.
That would be, so if you need to hit 115K jump serve against France to get a result, well, then that's probably what you got to do. But if you can hit an underhand float serve or underhand short serve to 2 and get a 2 pass, then maybe you should do that. I don't see the point in risking from the baseline if you can get a result with the free ball. But that's a very simplistic answer to a very complex question.
Yeah, fair. Now, what should coaches be taking priority? Defense? Are you the thought process of defense over offense, or defense wins championships, or that sort of theory, or do you have a different theory on that?
Last I checked, you don't get points for digs.
Valid. Okay.
This game is about kills. If you get kills, you win. If you get digs, you still have to kill the ball. So if you don't have an ability to kill the ball, it doesn't matter how many times you dig it. At some point, they'll hit a ball you can't dig. And so if you just keep digging free ball, digging free ball, digging free ball, then you're relying on your opponents to lose the game. You have no ability to win the game. And that's not something I'm comfortable heading into a match feeling like, man, I hope they hit a lot of balls out today to win. That's a very poor model. Now, sometimes that's the best you got. And sometimes your team just doesn't kill, or the other team's too powerful, and You got to play your team. Like I said, you got to max out your strengths versus your opponent's weaknesses. A couple years ago, we won a national championship with a team that was really flawed. We had two spikers and a bunch of guys who played volleyball, and that was a weird team. But they found a way to play their method well enough to win that year. And but that's not the goal. The goal is to have a team that's very good at transition spiking, a team that's very good at side out spiking. And if you can control those 55 to 60% of your points, you're going to win most of your games. If you can side out at, 5-10% better than your opponent, you win every time. It's really not that complicated. But the problem is you need your digging to help support that. You got to be hard to play against. But really, it's all about offense. And if your offense, I find, is good enough, then your defense will, just by the nature of training against your own team, get better. So if your defense is playing against the best offensive team in your division, well, they have to get better just by nature of playing against your team.
Okay. Now this is not my view. It's just a question. Jump setting, 2 feet or 1 foot. If it's 1 foot, left foot, off the left foot. Is it off the right foot? What's your thoughts?
So here's one of those scenarios where I think we get so stuck in on doing something athletically or something with our movements, we forget every footwork pattern for a setter is designed to make a better set quality, right?
Right.
So the answer to that is yes. 2 feet, 1 feet, yes. The answer is left foot spin set, right foot spin set, square to the net, square to the base. It doesn't really matter. You need to create tempo with quality and isolation to the right spots or right hitters. So all of those tools I think are very valuable. Yes, you probably have to start with some fundamentals, and build upon it. So I would say the more simple we can make their feet, the better we can make the set quality. And I think that's a good place to start. And then choose a movement pattern and get really, really good at that.
Yeah.
And then you could slowly layer on top of that with the other tools. For me, at our level, I want our setters to be able to do all of that. And we'll just teach them a different tool for a different situation. It's like a carpenter. A carpenter has a whole garage full of different tools to build stuff. And he may not use some of them very often, but he still needs to have them to be able to use if he needs them. And I think all of movement patterns are like that. You need a core movement pattern to fall back on, and then you need to slowly layer in new tools for the toolbox so that you can be a more dynamic athlete, be more diverse in the way you can play the game. And that's really important. I just don't think we should get stuck. The other one too is some setters are better with 2 feet than they are with one. Some people are better with a stagger than with parallel. Some people are better off 1 foot, off the right. Some people are better off their left. I mean, you can look around the world and you're going to find setters who do all of those things well. And same with arm actions. Like there's a different arm swing on every spiker in the world. There's some core principles that need to be in place, but I don't think we should get too caught up in some of those things. So for me, the answer is yes, all of them. But best case scenario, I love parallel feet, narrow feet, jump setting.
Right.
Because we pass perfectly to the net, and that's the goal.
I just think there's there's quite a number of coaches that are dead set on one way, right? And I love the answer. Just all of the above. So I wasn't expecting that one. So
there's the other answer to that question. So you say that all these coaches are stuck in their ways. Well, my answer is the coaches aren't the athlete. The coach's job is to make the athlete good, not to fit the athlete into the coach's paradigm. So you asked me about great coaching. Great coaching is understanding what you're looking at, realizing where the gaps are and how to help the athlete improve, or more importantly, remove the hindrances that the athlete has to being special. At the end of the day, we don't make athletes. They're already made. They're already great and they're already special. Our job is just to try to eliminate the things that are stopping them from being great. And maybe that's just helping them with better footwork or helping them with better focus or a higher hand position or really, I mean, they're still the athletes and they still make plays, and we just sit on the sideline with a clipboard and enjoy it. So I think we get stuck thinking we have the answers. The athletes have the answers. They're the puzzle. We just need to help them figure it out.
Fair. So with volleyball, obviously, exploding across the country. Do you see any setbacks on how fast this is? How big volleyball is growing so fast, or do you see this continuing to be this much growth in 2 to 3 more years, or do you see it plateauing?
Well, I hope it keeps going. This is great. I think we're in a great time for our game, both men's and women's side. It's a great game right now, especially with all the kind of health concerns going on in some of the contact sports. Our sport is so good for that. I love what's happening with our sport because it is one of the ultimate team games. I mean, you can't succeed in this game without being a great teammate. So I think it's great. I think this game is perfect for what culture is kind of moving towards, and I would love to see it continue. But your point being, yeah, Volleyball Canada has got their hands full to try to figure out how to manage all this. If you keep adding this many players every year, it's a great problem to have, but
Totally.
it's definitely creating some logistic questions that I know they're working through. I think it's an exciting time. The success of our national programs, and that's what I'd love to see. I'd love to see us finding ways to expose kids to the international game and the international stars more. I mean, I would love for my kids to be playing in the backyard, and one of them says, I'm Tilly, and the other guy's like, I'm Mazursky, and that would be so cool. But right now they're Crosby and McDavid. They're not, Murillo and Pretty.
Yeah.
Yes, that's from my era, right? But I would love for ours to expose these volleyball players to more of the international stars in the international game, and I think Volleyball Canada is working hard at that to try to get more events hosted,
Yeah.
and the higher profile of our players. Like, how cool would it be to show up to a practice and a bunch of kids are they're playing 2v2 and it's like, I'm Gord Perrin, and
Yeah.
you know and I'm Alicia Perrin, so that would be awesome, and that's what we need to try to help layer in as coaches to this growth. And it'll also help us all as coaches if we're learning from the best. When my kids are in the backyard pretending they're Crosby, they're trying the stuff they watched him do on TV. But how many kids are in the gym practicing what they saw in the World League game? And I
Yeah.
think that's an area where that creativity could be increased if we help drive our kids towards volleyball at the highest level a little bit more.
I agree. Yeah, and I think there's been definitely more exposure on the TV front regarding international since the men's team made the Olympics and stuff like that. So, and I give Volleyball Canada credit on the last nationals was in Edmonton this past season, and it was, in my opinion, the best nationals that they've put on. So, and they had the national team there and stuff like that, doing some gameplay. So yeah, I thought it was a cool experience for coaches and kids and athletes and parents. So I hope they continue with that sort of focus. If you can change one thing, what would you change regarding volleyball? How it maybe it's a rule. Like, should we be using the U.S. rules? Should U.S. be using the Canadian rules? Should there be should be 12 limited, 12 unlimited? Anything that you would change?
Yeah, no timeouts, no subs, games to 15.
Rally point? We
Yep.
go cool? Only get a point on serve?
Yep. No, rally point.
Oh, rally point. Okay.
Just shorten the games, and I know there was some talk about shortening the games going to best of 7. I love that idea. I thought that would be so exciting. Because I mean, at the end of the day, like, no one really cares until the game gets to 16s or 18s, and then the game is all right. Now it's on.
Yeah.
Well, let's eliminate all that other posturing and just get into the cool parts of volleyball right away.
Do you think youth sport will become a tiered system with some colleges trying to get into it and other universities trying to get into the league?
Well, that's a whole can of worms right there. It all depends on what the goals are. I mean, if the goals are to have a high performance league, then yes, you should tier it. But if the goals are to have more athletes playing at a higher level, well, then have more teams and try to keep the tiers level. So I depends on what we're trying to accomplish. If all the college teams and the youth sports teams are all in the same divisions, well, then the overall level would be weakened, but at least maybe there wouldn't be quite as, but overall the bottom would come up.
Yeah.
So a rising tide would float all the boats, and so everybody would get better. So, whereas if you went to a really specific tiered team, you would have, let's say, 8 to 10 really elite type environments, and then the rest of them would kind of not be pushed to the same level. So you would lose out on developing some athletes. So I really think there's some strengths and weaknesses to both.
Right.
Um, and that's for people way smarter and way higher up the food chain than me to figure out.
Fair. So I know you do some, you did the Douglas College Symposium. Your schedule's incredibly busy with your men's team. You did the Art of Coaching in June. Do you answer emails if a coach emails you? And I'm not suggesting
Eventually,
it, I'm just throwing it out there.
eventually. Oh, no, I'd be happy to. Be patient with me. I'm hit and miss.
Yeah.
I'm in a good flow. I'll get back to you quick, but otherwise, but please try. Like, I would love to receive questions and do whatever I can to give you the answers. Just be patient with my response for sure.
No, fair enough. And I just know people will be watching this and they might have a question they throw your way via email or Facebook Messenger or something like that. So I just want to make sure that's okay with you.
Absolutely. No, please. My email is ben.josephson@tw.ca. You can find on the website. Again, Instagram message is great. I do that a lot. Facebook Messenger is great too. So again, track me down if you want to talk volleyball. I'd love to.
Sounds good, Ben. Well, I really appreciate you spending the time with me this morning, and I wish your men's team the best of luck in the upcoming season. And I know you and I will cross paths